Meet Michael. It's 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Michael sits in his office, his desk scattered with papers and sticky notes, but he isn't paying attention to any of it. He's staring at his phone, scrolling through Instagram. The first post he sees is of an old college buddy who just recently launched a startup. The second post of his ex-girlfriend, smiling with her friends. And the third post is someone celebrating a promotion. With every swipe, his chest feels tighter. What am I even doing with my life? He whispers under his breath. Michael works as a senior manager at a utility company in Toronto. For 6 years, he's been reliable, efficient, and consistent. But being reliable just isn't enough anymore. He wants to feel inspired and challenged rather than feeling like he's just there. He used to have big dreams of leading innovative projects and creating meaningful change, but those dreams have faded into the background of weekly meetings, performance reviews, and routine tasks. Adding to his frustration is the breakup with his long-term girlfriend 3 months ago. They had shared dreams of traveling the world and maybe even starting a family one day. Now, he lives in an apartment that feels more like a holding space than a home. In the evenings, he's mindlessly watching TV and having one too many drinks, hoping to quiet the voice in his head that keeps asking, "What's the point?" What Michael really wants is to feel proud of his work and to wake up excited for the day ahead. He wants to tap into his creativity, to lead with purpose, but he's stuck in this cycle of self-doubt and negativity. His energy is low, and even the smallest tasks feel overwhelming. Today, I'll be speaking with Dr. Alan Lycka, renowned speaker, coach, and best-selling author of The Secrets of Living a Fantastic Life. After transforming his own life in the face of adversity, Dr. Al helps people like Michael rediscover their purpose, shift their mindset, and create lives they love. And today, we'll be exploring how Michael can reconnect with his creativity, rebuild his confidence, and find fulfillment in both his work and his life. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Dr. Al, you have been recognized as one of the leading cosmetic dermatologists in the world. You're also on stages speaking to audiences, you're doing life coaching, but I know years ago something happened that changed your life, and I've heard you talk about this, and it was in 2003. What happened?
You know, it came out of the blue. I was walking with my wife at Disneyland, supposedly the happiest place on the earth. And my wife turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" You know, Jay, I was taken aback. For once in my life, I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't even thunk anything wrong. But she persisted. "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Dear, I haven't got the faintest idea what you're talking about." She said, "Listen to your foot. It's flapping." I said, "Come on, dear. That's the stupidest thing you ever said." And then she said, "No, listen to your foot." And my right foot had suddenly and mysteriously developed a foot drop. Now, for those who don't know what that is, you know, your brain is programmed to lift up your foot with each step that you take. And my right foot wasn't doing it. It was slapping on the pavement. So my wife said, "Did you have a stroke?" I said to her, "Dear, You're a doctor. I'm a doctor. There's no way I had a stroke. Well, then she gave me the ultimatum. She said, dear, when we get back, you better get this checked out. So, Jay, what do you do when your significant other gives you that ultimatum?
You go get it checked out or you're in trouble.
Exactly. So I started going the doctor route. I saw friends that were doctors. They were befuddled. They had no idea what was going on. So they sent me to more doctors and more doctors and more doctors. They did CAT scans. They did brain scans. And I think they even did scans. And at the end of the day, you know what they found, Jay?
What'd they find?
Absolutely nothing. So, you know what a doctor does when he finds absolutely nothing?
What do they do?
More tests and more tests and more tests. I think I had every test known to man. And you know, at the end of the day, the doctor still didn't know what was going on. So they decided as a group to send me to a world leading neurologist. Now, our neurologist is the brain guy. He's got his answers to all the questions in the world. So I walked in and I said, hi. He said, hi back. He said, you better be sitting down when I tell you this. I said, why? I have a dropped right foot. He said, no, you don't. You have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Get your affairs in order. I said, is there a way to prove this diagnosis? He said, of course, on autopsy. I got mad. I said, I'm not going to die to prove you wrong. So I
Mm.
stormed out of his office. I slammed the door. I somehow made it to my car and I cried for hours. I sometimes somehow made it home. I told my wife the diagnosis. She said, you know, dear, I don't know what you have, but you don't have ALS. But you know, when you go through this sort of thing, this trauma, your brain goes through some standard things. You go through anger. Jay, you become angry at the world. I was angry at my wife. I was angry at my children. I was angry at everybody in my world, my staff, my patients. But I couldn't tell them what was wrong.
Mm.
Otherwise, they might abandon me. You know, you go through bargaining. Oh God, please don't let this happen. I'll do anything if you don't let this happen. You go through denial. You deny anything happens. And that is a tough one because you know something is going on. You know, my right foot wasn't working, and then my right hand became non functional. Now, I was a right handed surgeon, so that was a problem. But you know, I was smart. I learned how to be a left handed surgeon. So
Mm.
everything I did on the right side, I learned to do on the left side. But you know, back then, there weren't even the tools developed. So I had to go to the machine shop at the hospital and say, this is a right hand pair of scissors. Could you make it as a left hand pair of scissors? And sure enough, they obliged. So I was able to do everything I regularly did. But you know, Jay, you go through depression. Have you ever been depressed?
Well, there's so many different ways people will define depression. And so I have definitely had some lows. I would say that the descriptions I've heard of people who have really suffered from clinical depression, um, I can't say I've had a similar experience as they have, and so I know what they're referring to because I've had maybe moments where I felt that way, such as when I lost my father, had some illnesses in my family where it really forced me to just break down. So that was the closest I've ever gone to a doctor, Al, with some losses that I had in my family and some serious psychological issues that some people were going through in my family.
And losses frequently put us in this state. And I had a loss. My loss was, I was going to lose my life. But
Yeah.
what happens is you go through, you can't eat, you can't sleep, your body shuts down, you stare at the ceiling all day and all night. You don't want to get out of bed. It's so bad. And that is really tough. And, you even think you better end it all. And I had a plan to kill myself
Wow.
because I wasn't going to let myself die gasping for air like I saw people with ALS do. So before I did that, I went to my wife and I said, "Dear, what do I have?" And she said, "I haven't got the faintest idea, but you're smart. You'll figure it out." I
Hmm.
said, "Dear, I've seen every doctor I know. How can I figure it out?" She said, "Perhaps you haven't seen the right doctor yet." Well, it's funny how nature presents itself with a solution when you're looking for it. And back in 2003, the internet was invented, but it wasn't like the internet like it is now. You probably heard about it back then.
Well, it was around, but it definitely had a didn't have the same kind of functions it has today for sure.
No, what you had to do was put your phone on a cradle and it would go
Oh
ria,
yeah,
ria,
I remember
ria
that.
for 15 minutes. And if it connected to the other side, you were able to communicate. Now,
Right.
you had to communicate in a language called DOS because there wasn't enough memory in computers. So you literally had to use that to get to the other sides. Fortunately, I had friends that were nerds and they helped me get to the other side. So I got there and we surfed the net. And I found a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, by the name of David Martz that had a story very similar to mine. But
Hmm.
he got worse much more rapidly. And within weeks, he was on his deathbed. So, this man was amazing. I read his story, and what he had gone through was he was on his deathbed, and doctors from around the world were coming to see him and say goodbye to him. And a doctor came up from Texas to say goodbye to David. And he looked at him, and in 30 seconds, he said, "You do not have ALS." David whispered, because that's all he could do. He said, "What do I have?" The doctor said, "You have chronic Lyme's disease. You've been bitten by a tick. And if I'm right, I can start you on treatment and make you better."
Hmm.
So miraculously, David was started on treatment. And like Lazarus, he arose from the dead. So, I knew I had to get in touch with this doctor. So I phoned every hospital in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And sure enough, I got in touch with them at the Methodist Hospital. And we talked for hours. And he said, "Can you come down to see me?" And I said, "Of course." I said, "When?" He said, "As soon as you can." I said,
Hmm.
"David, it's it's Thanksgiving in Canada. My wife's invited 35 people down. I can't come over right now." He said, "Aren't there any planes in Canada?" So I went to my wife, my hat in my hand, and said, "Dear, I won't be here for Thanksgiving."
Oh
She said,
wow.
"Why? I've invited 35 people over." I said, "Dear, there's a doctor in Colorado Springs that claims he can help me." She said, "Well, what are you waiting for? I'll pack your bags for you. I'll drive you to the airport. Come on, you're wasting time." That's the story of true love, David, where your spouse does everything to help you and support you every way they can. So, I got on a plane from Edmonton to Denver It was a beautiful ride, 2.5 hours, no problems. But then I got on a plane from Denver to Colorado Springs. It was a rinky dink puddle jumper. Have you ever been on a rinky dink puddle jumper?
I have. I have a few times. They are quite the experience for sure.
Well, that's saying it kindly. This flight was the flight from hell.
Uh-huh.
Literally, it would climb to a height and then drop 100 feet without warning. It would
Mm.
climb back to that height again, then drop 200 feet without warning. Then it would climb to that height and then drop 300 feet without warning. It was like the drop of doom at Disney World over and over and over again. It was a 15-minute flight, but everybody who got off that flight was green. And I crawled off that flight, and there was David on the tarmac to meet me. And I said, David, thank God you're here. He said, you're not looking so good. I said, I'm not feeling so good. He
Mm.
said, it's probably a metaphor for what you're going through. But we went to a coffee shop and we talked for hours. And David said, I think history is repeating itself. I think I could start you on treatment and I think you're going to get better. And that's why I'm here in
Mm.
2025. I'm here because I didn't let despair and desperation get in my way. I'm here because I knew there was another option. I'm here. And, nature taught me resilience.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Al, you cover this really well in your book, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. I was reviewing some of what you wrote, and there was a quote here that I wrote down. I wanted to just read to you. And I would love for you to expand on it because I think it's very related to what you just shared. That story of facing your mortality and having to overcome it. You wrote, the trauma taught me that one cannot expect a perfect life, but must appreciate moments of beauty interspersed among tragedy. Can you expand on that?
It's the depths of our existence that helps us to understand the peaks of our existence. Those depths are terrible when we go through them, but there is an unwritten law of physics, and it's the harder the fall, the bigger the bounce. And this is what you open yourself up to if you listen to that call. That bounce occurs and you get to a higher height than you were before. I lost the ability to use my right leg and my right hand, but I gained the ability to use my left hand. And this resilience training was something that I've used over and over again. In 2000, the world ended for a lot of people as we knew it. The pandemic came on, but those that were resilient learned to adapt. I was going to retire at that time and go around the world speaking. But every stage in the world shut down
Yeah.
at that time because they didn't want people in rooms. So, I had learned to be a podcaster back in the early 2000s. I was one of the original podcasters even before they became popular. I used this to promote my cosmetic surgery business. But, I had those skills. So I started them to speak on happiness. And I started a podcast called How to Live a Fantastic Life, which is called now Live with the Fantastic Dr. L.
Yeah.
And it grew and grew and grew. Currently, we have 7 million monthly listeners. And it's even growing more because it's being picked up by more stations like Roku and Apple TV and a ton of more stations. So we have the potential to be heard by hundreds of millions of listeners every month.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And the term fantastic life is something that I want to ask you more about. Maybe I'll just put it this, can you define it for me? What is a fantastic life?
A fantastic life is what you make out of it. And it's what you make out of it every day. Every one of us is going to have days where it's not so good, things are all going wrong, and everything else. But you have to remember that every day you have is a gift. You're not guaranteed to be here tomorrow. You can't do anything with what happened yesterday. So, how you live today matters. And you should always live it to the fullest. You should live it to make it matter. So you should do something for somebody else every day that you wouldn't regularly do.
Yeah.
You should do something to learn every day because that is the gift you have for the future. You should do something that makes you happy every day. And that is how you make every day matter. When you start up in the morning, you should you should think of three things you're grateful for. Jay, I saw in my calendar you were here today. So that was one of the things I was grateful for because that truly is an amazing gift. And we're able to influence more people in the world. At the end of the day, you should say three things you're grateful for as well.
Yeah. Well, the experience that people have with gratitude, I think, is strong enough to where it's so evident that tapping into it is worthwhile and being intentional about it. Uh, Pairing that with all the research on it, it's one of the most effective ways to stay in a positive mindset. Because what is the common occurrence, Dr. Al? The common occurrence for people is we focus on all the things we want but don't have, or we focus on all the things that we have that we don't want. But what gratitude allows us to do is tap into the things that we have that we do want, and the things that we want that we do have.
And it's been shown that people that concentrate on gratitude rewire the brain waves in their brain, the pathways in their brain. You know, Jay, we all are wired to a negative brain style. Why? Our reptilian brain is wired for flight, fight, fright, and freeze. Why? Because in those days gone by, we needed those mechanisms to literally survive. But in this day and age, in 2025, higher brain mechanisms allow us to survive and thrive better. And that's where gratitude comes in.
Absolutely. And what can get in the way often, Dr. Al, is when some major challenge, obstacle gets in the way where it completely throws us for a loop. And in your case, of course, the diagnosis did that for you, where you felt like this was something that was so difficult to overcome. It was something that at least initially, right? And then you worked through it yourself. And in the case of the story that we heard at the top of the podcast of Michael, his struggle was breaking up with his girlfriend. So we have these instances in life, Dr. Al, where we lose a relationship, we lose a job, we lose a loved one, someone passes away, and it creates such a disturbance. What is your recommendation as to what someone can do right after these things happen as a means to not fall into the spiral? In other words, how do we catch it early so that we can work to overcome these adversities when they're so unexpected?
Okay, so the first thing you got to do, I've called it the 7 steps to resilience, all of them beginning with the letter R. So the first thing you must do is reframe your mindset. Shift the perspective to see changes as opportunities. Reframing transforms obstacles into stepping stones and fosters a solution based attitude. Okay, so this girlfriend for Michael just didn't work for him. But there's a million other people out there that really make it happen for a person. And, this is really what you need to do. You need to regroup and reflect. Take a step back to evaluate the situation objectively. Reflection helps you assess your strengths, identify resources, and create a plan of action. Mark Victor Hansen, co author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, was in a marriage that wasn't working for him. So he wrote down on a piece of paper the things he wanted in his next wife, and he came up with 100 things. And sure enough, a beautiful lady by the name of Crystal Hansen came into his existence. The world, the universe saw his needs and literally provided it for him. Do you think Mark Victor Hansen is happy now?
I
You
I
bet.
bet he is. Yeah.
Okay. So that was a change that was needed.
And
So,
I just want to comment on this, Dr. Al, because it's fascinating how often I hear these stories. There's a story I've heard Tony Robbins say that's nearly identical when he wrote down exactly what he was looking for in his partner. And the wife that he's married to now fits so much of what he wrote in that list. I personally, and if my fiance is listening, she knows I've told this story, have done the same exercise and I am so grateful to have met my fiance and soon to be wife. And I've actually even shared this with clients too. One of my clients who lives in Florida, I asked her to go through this exercise and she said, "Oh, Jay, maybe it's over for me. Maybe I'll never meet somebody." Because she was, in her 50s, and she said, "I don't think I'm going to ever find anyone." And I said to her, "Please go through this. Please give it a shot." And she finally did. And it wasn't immediately afterwards, Dr. Al, but months later, she sends me a text, and it was an image of her in a white wedding dress standing next to her husband.
it's funny how the universe sometimes responds to you.
Yeah.
When I was 18, I said to the universe, I wanted a girl with red hair. Well, my wife has brown hair. We've been happily married for 43 years, but we have 3 grandchildren with red hair, all of which
Oh.
are girls. Sometimes the universe doesn't provide exactly what you think it's going to. And I tell you, all those 3 grandchildren are my pride and my joy.
Ah, that's beautiful. It's as if the universe has a sense of humor in how it wants to deliver what it is that you're asking for, and it doesn't always go according to the way you thought it would. And what I find too is I have to ask you about this because I know so many people struggle with just getting caught in these negative cycles. They say, "Hey, I want to be more positive thinking," but they fall into the trap, Dr. Al, over and over again. Like Michael's story of he's falling into, I'm not feeling excited about my work, for example. I'm not feeling passionate about what I'm doing. What's the way in which I guess ignite that passion again when you feel like you've been doing the same things over and over again and you're in this negative cycle and it's monotonous for you? How do you snap out of it and
Well,
get yourself into that
first
mindset?
thing you need to do is recharge your energy. Don't use your energy in a negative way.
Yeah.
Get adequate sleep, nutrition, exercise. Try to recharge regularly to maintain peak performance. You need to recharge. You need to do that. You need to reinforce your support network. There are people around you that can help you. And I think people should always have a support network, and they should always appoint a board of directors to help them out, either living or dead. These people can give you advice. So in your network, ask them the question, what would you do in this situation?
Yeah.
Mark Victor Hansen has an answer. Write down a list of 100 things. Redefine your goals and take action. Action is the thing that gets out everything. You take purposeful steps towards overcoming challenges. Get out there, meet new people, talk to new people. His new girlfriend might be in the grocery store, and if he doesn't say hi to her when he's there, he may never meet her.
Yeah.
So, you really need to resist giving up. You need to stay positive no matter what, and you need to move forward. Those are the 7 R's: reframe, regroup, recharge, reinforce, redefine, respond with action, and resist giving up.
Mm. What is required is to be able to work through the discomfort of it all, right, Dr. Al? Because if you think about taking action, which is, let's say for Michael, it would be to talk to that girl at the grocery store, or maybe it's to look for another job opportunity if he doesn't feel passionate or excited about what he's doing. You have to be able to sit through the discomfort.
It's funny, but everything meaningful in life has discomfort. If you want a new body and start on an exercise plan, your body's going to ache. If you're going to do anything in life that is worthwhile, you have to go through the steps. It's not given to you as a given.
And what you're saying then, Dr. Al, is you have to have the courage to push through the discomfort, which is easier said than done. Now, here's where I think you have a life experience where it life really forced it out of you in many ways. You said, like, my resilience training. I love how you framed that, to have the resilience training to be able to work through the discomfort. For someone who says to you, Dr. Al, hey, I want to be able to be more of an action taker. I want to do this, but I hold myself back. I'm afraid. How do you advise them to be able to take some steps forward and to take that action rather than just talk about it?
You know, the thing is, the word fear has is its own answers right in that. See, fear is an acronym, and it stands for fantasizing events appearing real. Your mind cannot tell the difference between a real and a visually imagined event. And so, you know, worrying is negative goal setting. Crying is how you water your own growth. So if you have a vision of something, you make that vision in your mind, and that is how you make it happen. There's the story of a person that um, was in a prison for 20 years. Now, before he was put in that prison, He was an avid golfer. So he imagined himself playing 18 holes every day. And when he got out of that prisoner of war camp, he was in Vietnam, he played his first round and he lowered his score by 5 strokes.
Wow. Wow. There's a research that was done by the University of Chicago that's very similar to this, Dr. Al. They took these three groups and they asked them to shoot free throws, basketball, play basketball, shoot free throws. Group one was the control group, so they didn't have them do anything. Group two, they had them practice shooting free throws every day for 1 hour. Group three, they had them visualize shooting free throws. So they would went through it in their mind and had that action go through in their own minds, them practicing them shooting, but they never touched a basketball. The results were that the control group saw no change. Group two saw a 24% improvement in their free throws. Group three saw a 23% improvement in their free throws, which suggests that the people who practice 1 hour a day had nearly the same improvement as people who simply sat, closed their eyes, and went through it within their own minds.
You know, this, as I said, the mind cannot tell the difference between an actual event and an imagined event. So if you imagine things and run through the situation, so let's go through the situation for Michael. What can he do? Well, he can write down the 100 traits that he wants of his beautiful new girlfriend. And then in his mind, he can imagine meeting her, being with her, smiling with her, interacting with her. And he can tell his mind this is all going to occur by July of this year.
Yeah. And what this can apply to, by the way, for all of our listeners, is well beyond just a partner. This could apply to your work. This could apply to the kind of achievements that you wish to have, even outside of work, anything that you're passionate about. If you can really set your mind to the future that you're looking to create, you will begin to create it. What happens is we reprogram our subconscious in a way that will allow for us to notice opportunities, to be able to then take more action naturally when those opportunities arise. So, Dr. Al, I want to ask you to imagine this kind of scenario with me. I like to do this towards the end of a conversation just because it gives you an opportunity to imagine what it would be like to interact with Michael here. So, imagine Michael reads your book and he reaches out to you through your website, schedules time. He tells you his story about how he's really struggling following the breakup of his ex-girlfriend. He's not feeling passionate about his work. He's not feeling excited. Every day feels the same. He's caught in negativity and self-doubt. And you have an opportunity here to help Michael. But rather than just tell him something, you want to pose a question. You want to ask him something, because I know that's what you would do. I see you smiling there. You would most likely go with a question, right, Dr. Al? What would you ask him? What would be the first question that you would pose to Michael?
I would ask Michael, what would be the ideal life that you envision in 3 months from now? What would be this? What would make that life fantastic?
Yeah, I love it. Just the question that creates the shift in one's mind towards a positive future,
Yeah.
which is
Then
ultimately
I
what we
would
need.
ask him,
Yeah.
I'd follow up with a second question. Or, can you give me 3 little steps to make that happen? Can you write down 3 little steps to make that happen?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Dr. Al, this was incredible. If you see me looking down, by the way, and writing things, I write notes. And the reason I write notes is because I learn when I host these podcasts. I learn from my amazing guests, such as yourself, and I always listen back as well to be able to download some of the main insights and takeaways for our audience. So, uh, for anyone listening, I highly recommend go to dralanlycka.com. His full name, dralanlycka.com. We have it in the show notes as well. Learn a little bit more about what Dr. Al is doing. I know you have some free resources that you give away right there on your website. You learn more about Dr. Al's speaking as well as his life coaching. Dr. Al is clearly someone who can inspire a group as well as support individuals through any life challenges. So I highly recommend go to dralanlycka.com, learn more about Dr. Al, and I want to just express my gratitude. This is my one of three today, Dr. Al, is that I had this time with you. It was so meaningful, and I deeply appreciate you taking the time today and would love to do it again in the future sometime, Dr. Al.
Jay, this was a special day. And when people go to my site, write my executive assistant, Tammy, at Lycka, Lycka. Her first name's Tammy, Tami, at Lycka, Ly is in yellow, CKA, .ca. Make sure it's .ca because the site is in Canada. Tell her that you'd like to be on my waiting list for my coaching group that's coming up. You know, coaching is what everybody needs to get to a new level. So I'm going to start a small coaching group in the next 3 months. But you got to be on the waiting list because I know it's going to be oversubscribed. Make sure you do it for yourself. And you will see how 2025 is going to be the most amazing year for you on the planet.
I love it. Thank you again, Dr. Al.
Thank you, Jay, and have a fantastic day.
So grateful to have had that conversation with Dr. Al and for him to have shared his story of having to hear that he only had a short time to live, and for him to bounce back the way he has and share his message with the world is very inspiring. And I'm going to share with you what I think are the most important insights and actionable takeaways from our conversation. So the first of the three insights, the first one was the harder the fall, the bigger the bounce. We tend to see our challenges as misfortunes and things that have only a negative implication. What Dr. Al was suggesting, and I know many of you have had this experience, is that sometimes the biggest challenge is what leads to the biggest growth for us. So to be able to shift that perspective and say, hey, when I fall hard, it means I'm going to bounce back higher. Second insight, everything meaningful in life has discomfort. We talked about that with physical exercise, but even psychological challenges. There needs to be discomfort in order for there to be growth. Third insight, the power of visualization. He told that story about the person who was in jail for 20 years and then became a great golfer, having not swung a golf club. And then I shared that study from the University of Chicago. And it's amazing to me how this is something that so few people tap into, yet could provide such incredible results. Our actionable takeaways. The first one, his recommendation to write down 3 things you're grateful for every morning and even at night to wrap up your day. He talked about the studies of the different brain patterns that they see in people who practice gratitude, how we're wired to focus more on negativity from our reptilian brain, and how this is something that research has proven makes a significant difference in the way you show up every day. Second actionable takeaway, write down exactly what you want. He told the story of Mark Victor Hansen writing down the description of his wife and how he ended up meeting someone who fit that criteria. I have a similar story, which I shared, and so many others. But do we take the time to do that? Do we actually consider? Do we actually go into a writing process of clearly specifying what we want. And the third actionable takeaway, appoint a board of directors. He said, living or dead. I love that. Have that board of directors with you that you can rely on to get feedback, to brainstorm, and to be able to come up with the appropriate action plan to get you to where you want to be. Join us in our next episode on Friday. I'm going to do a deeper dive into some of those studies on gratitude. You can probably tell right by now, I base so much on research on what we can pull from experts rather than only, my own theories. I like to base this all on actual evidence. And I'm also going to go through some of the practices that I know from the research that really do produce results with gratitude, because I think gratitude practice can get a little confusing at times. It's not really something people are getting the most value out of. So I'm going to walk you through how to really make the most out of a gratitude practice. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.